I came home to find my son struggling to breathe. My husband said calmly he just fell. Leave him be. I rushed him to the hospital. When the nurse saw my husband arrive, she began to tremble. She whispered, Why is he here? I froze on the spot. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Tamsin Brewer's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary as she turned onto Pinewood Drive. The October sky hung low over Hawthorne Bend, Missouri, painted in shades of burnt orange and gray that made everything look old and tired. She'd been thinking about dinner for the last 15 miles. Something quick, maybe scrambled eggs and toast, because the thought of standing over a stove felt impossible after 9 hours at the county clerk's office. The house came into view, a modest two-story with white siding that needed repainting and a porch that sagged slightly on the left side. Cole had promised to fix it 3 summers ago. Tamsin pulled into the driveway and cut the engine. The sudden silence felt wrong somehow, like the moment before thunder. She grabbed her purse and the grocery bag from the passenger seat, just milk and bread, the essentials, and climbed out. Her shoes crunched on gravel. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and went quiet. The front door was unlocked. It always was. Cole didn't believe in locked doors during daylight hours, said it made them look paranoid to the neighbors. Eli. Tamsin called as she stepped inside. I'm home, honey. Nothing. The living room sat empty, television dark. Cole's jacket draped over the back of the couch. The afternoon light filtered through the curtains, casting everything in amber. Tamsin set the groceries on the kitchen counter and listened. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the sink ticked steadily. But no footsteps. No video game sounds from upstairs. No 10-year-old boy running to tell her about his day. Eli, she called again, louder this time. Her heart began to beat faster, that animal instinct mothers have when something feels off. She moved through the kitchen toward the hallway, past the dining table where Eli's homework sat half-finished, past the family photos on the wall, smiling faces frozen in better times. The bathroom door stood half open at the end of the hall. Light spilled out. Tamsin pushed it open. Eli sat on the tile floor, his back pressed against the side of the bathtub, his knees drawn up to his chest. His breathing came in short, shallow gasps, the kind that made his whole body shudder. His face had gone pale, almost gray, and his eyes stared at nothing in particular, just fixed on some point in the air, unfocused and glassy. Baby! Tamsin dropped to her knees beside him, her purse hitting the floor with a thud. What happened? Talk to me. Eli's mouth moved, but no words came out. Just more of that panicked breathing, like he couldn't quite fill his lungs. He tripped. Tamsin's head snapped up. Cole stood in the doorway, one shoulder leaning against the frame, arms crossed over his chest. He wore his work clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt, boots still on. His expression was calm. Too calm. Fell in the hallway, Cole continued, his voice flat and matter-of-fact. Got the wind knocked out of him. Happens to kids all the time. You're making it worse by hovering. Tamsin looked back at Eli. Her son's eyes met hers for just a second, and in that second she saw fear. Real fear. The kind that makes children small. Then she saw the marks. They weren't dramatic, weren't bleeding or swollen, just faint red impressions on the side of Eli's neck, 4 of them, roughly the size and spacing of fingers, already beginning to bruise, purple at the edges. The air in the bathroom suddenly felt too thin. Tamsin. Cole's voice had an edge now. I said you're making it worse. She didn't answer him, didn't look at him. She just gathered Eli into her arms. Carefully, slowly, the way you'd lift something precious and breakable. He was light for his age, always had been, but in that moment he felt even lighter, like fear had hollowed him out. "We're going to the hospital," Tamsin said quietly. "For what?" Cole pushed off the doorframe. "He's breathing fine. You're overreacting." Tamsin stood, Eli clinging to her neck. "Get out of the way." Tamsin. "Get out of the way." Something in her voice made Cole step back. Maybe it was the steadiness of it. Maybe it was the absolute absence of doubt. Tamsin walked past him. Through the hallway, through the living room, out the front door. She didn't grab her purse. Didn't grab her phone. Didn't grab anything except her son. Behind her, Cole didn't follow. She buckled Eli into the passenger seat of the car, her hand shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up with her body. The engine turned over on the second try. She backed out of the driveway too fast, tires squealing slightly on the pavement. Eli coughed once, then twice. His breathing was starting to even out, but his hand kept touching his throat, fingers probing gently at the tender spots. "Mom." His voice came out hoarse. "Don't talk, baby. Just breathe. We'll be there in 10 minutes. Tamsin drove faster than she should have through the residential streets, ran a stop sign at the corner of Oak and 3rd, and didn't care. The world outside the car windows blurred past. Houses, trees, the old Baptist church with its white steeple, the gas station where teenagers congregated after school. Everything looked normal. Everything looked fine. Everything was a lie. Redwood County Medical Center sat on the edge of town, a low brick building that had been expanded twice over the years, adding wings that didn't quite match the original architecture. The emergency entrance was around back, marked by a faded blue sign and a concrete awning. Tamsin pulled into the first parking spot she saw, didn't bother straightening the car. She came around to Eli's side and helped him out, keeping one arm around his shoulders as they walked toward the sliding glass doors. The waiting room was half full. An elderly man with a bandaged hand, a woman holding a crying toddler, a teenager with an ice pack pressed to his ankle. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, and the air smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Tamsin walked straight to the check-in desk. The woman behind the plexiglass looked up from her computer screen, saw Eli's face, and her expression shifted immediately from bored to alert. "How can I?" "My son can't breathe properly," Tamsin said. "He needs to be seen now." "What happened?" "I don't know. I found him like this." The woman's eyes flicked to the marks on Eli's neck. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, fast and efficient. "Take him through those double doors. Someone will meet you." The emergency department beyond the waiting room was quieter, just the steady beep of monitors and the low murmur of voices. A nurse appeared almost immediately, middle-aged, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a ponytail and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her name tag read Brenda Knox, RN. "This way, sweetheart," Brenda said to Eli, leading them to a curtained bay. "Let's get you sitting down." She helped Eli onto the examination table and immediately began taking his vital signs: blood pressure, pulse, oxygen levels. Her movements were practiced, gentle, but Tamsin noticed how Brenda's gaze kept returning to Eli's neck. "Can you tell me what happened?" Brenda asked, clipping a pulse oximeter onto Eli's finger. Tamsin opened her mouth, but the words felt stuck. "His father said he fell." "His father said." Brenda glanced up. "Were you there when it happened?" "No. I came home from work. Found him on the bathroom floor." "Was he breathing like this?" "Yes." Brenda wrapped a blood pressure cuff around Eli's arm, her touch careful. "Eli, honey, does your throat hurt?" Eli nodded. "Can you point to where it hurts most?" Eli's fingers touched the side of his neck, right where the marks were darkest. Brenda's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She turned to Tamsin. "I'm going to get the doctor. We'll do a full examination and probably some imaging to make sure there's no internal damage. You can stay right here with him." She disappeared through the curtain. Tamsin pulled a chair close to the examination table and took Eli's hand. His palm was cold and damp. "Mom, am I in trouble?" he whispered. The question broke something inside her chest. "No, baby. No, you're not in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong." Dad said. Eli's voice cracked. "He said not to tell you. He said you'd be upset." Tamsin squeezed his hand tighter. "What did he say not to tell me?" But before Eli could answer, the curtains swept open. Cole walked in. He'd changed his shirt, Tamsin noticed. The flannel was gone, replaced by a clean gray t-shirt. His hair was combed. He'd even put on cologne. She could smell it from across the small space. Something sharp and woody. "There's my boy," Cole said, forcing a smile. "Feeling better, champ?" Eli went rigid. His hand clenched around Tamsin's. Cole glanced at Tamsin, and for just a fraction of a second, she saw calculation in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by concern. "They taking good care of you?" Before anyone could respond, Brenda Knox pushed back through the curtain. She stopped short when she saw Cole. The temperature in the room dropped. Brenda's expression didn't change much, just a slight tightening around her mouth, a stiffness in her shoulders. She looked at Cole for a long moment, then turned deliberately to Tamsin. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you privately for a moment." "I'm her husband," Cole said. "Anything you need to say." "Privately," Brenda repeated, her voice firm. Tamsin stood. Cole reached for her arm, but she pulled away and followed Brenda out into the hallway. They walked a few yards down, past medication carts and supply closets, until they were out of earshot. Brenda turned to face her, and when she spoke, her voice was low and urgent. "You're not supposed to have him here." "I'm sorry." "Your husband, Cole Brewer." Brenda glanced back toward the examination bay. "He's flagged in our system. There's a note from 3 years ago. He's not supposed to be near pediatric patients without supervision." The hallway tilted slightly. Tamsin put her hand against the wall. "What do you mean, flagged?" Brenda hesitated, clearly weighing how much to say. "I can't give you specific details, HIPAA, and all that, but I can tell you we've seen him before. With another child, different last name. The situation was concerning." "Concerning how?" "Concerning enough that a report was filed. Concerning enough that restrictions were recommended." Brenda's eyes were steady, compassionate, but unflinching. "I'm telling you this because that boy in there needs someone to protect him, and I'm not sure he's had that." Tamsin's mind raced. 3 years ago, another child, different last name. She thought about Cole's sister, who'd moved to Kansas City suddenly with her daughter. Thought about how they'd stopped coming to Christmas. Thought about the time Cole had casually mentioned his ex-girlfriend had gotten a restraining order against him, called her crazy, said she'd made up stories to keep him from his kid. How many times had Tamsin believed him without question? "Did anyone?" Her voice came out rough. She cleared her throat. "Did anyone do anything? Report him? Call the police?" Brenda's silence was answer enough. "Why not?" "Because people are afraid," Brenda said simply. "Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of getting involved. Afraid of lawsuits. And men like your husband, they're very good at making everyone doubt what they saw." She paused. "But I remember. And I'm watching." Tamsin looked back toward the examination bay, where Eli sat alone with Cole. Her stomach twisted. "What do I do?" she asked quietly. "You protect your son," Brenda said, "however you need to. And you don't let anyone convince you that what you saw wasn't real." They kept Eli for observation for 3 hours. Ran x-rays to check for fractured cartilage in the throat. Photographed the bruising. Asked questions in careful, clinical language. A doctor, young, tired-looking, explained that the pattern was consistent with manual strangulation, but that Eli seemed stable now. No signs of serious damage. "We're required to file a report with Child Services," the doctor said, looking at Tamsin, deliberately not looking at Cole. Standard procedure in cases like this. Cole laughed. Actually laughed. Cases like what? My kid fell. You're making this into something it's not. The doctor didn't respond, just made a note on his tablet and left. They finally released Eli at 11 o'clock at night. Tamsin signed the discharge papers with numb fingers, accepted the follow-up appointment card, and walked Eli out to the car. Cole trailed behind them, silent now, his earlier confidence replaced by something harder and colder. Tamsin drove. Cole sat in the passenger seat. Eli lay in the back, already half asleep despite everything. The roads were empty at this hour, just the occasional passing headlight. The dashboard lights cast Cole's face in blue-white shadows. "You embarrassed me tonight," Cole said finally. His voice was low, controlled. "Running off to the hospital, making them think I hurt him." Tamsin kept her eyes on the road. "You did hurt him." "He fell. He has finger marks on his throat from when I tried to help him up." "Jesus, Tamsin, I'm his father." "That's supposed to mean something," Tamsin said quietly. "What's that supposed to mean?" She didn't answer. The truth was she didn't know yet. Didn't know what she was going to do or how or when. But something had shifted inside her in that hospital hallway, listening to Brenda Knox tell her what everyone had known and no one had said. They pulled into the driveway. Cole got out first, slammed the door hard enough to make Tamsin flinch. She helped Eli out of the back seat, wrapped her arm around him as they walked to the house. Inside, Cole went straight to the bedroom without another word. Tamsin heard the door close, heard the lock click. She helped Eli upstairs to his room, tucked him into bed even though he was too old for tucking in, smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "Mom." Eli's voice was small in the darkness. "Yeah, baby." "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For making Dad mad." "I shouldn't have," he stopped. "I should have just been tougher." Tamsin felt her chest tighten. She sat down on the edge of the bed and took both of Eli's hands in hers, held them firmly so he'd know she meant every word. "Listen to me," she said. "What happened tonight was not your fault. Not any part of it. Do you understand?" Eli's eyes glistened in the dim light from the hallway. "Your father." Tamsin stopped, choosing her words carefully. "Your father made a choice. He's responsible for his choices, not you. Never you. But he said—" "I don't care what he said. I'm telling you the truth now." She squeezed his hands. "And I promise you, I'm going to make sure you're safe, no matter what it takes." Eli nodded slowly, but she could see he didn't quite believe her. Not yet. That would take time. Trust, once broken, didn't repair overnight. She stayed with him until he fell asleep, listening to his breathing even out, watching the rise and fall of his chest in the shadows. Then she went back downstairs and sat at the kitchen table in the dark. The house was silent around her. Not peaceful, just silent. Tamsin pulled out her phone and opened the Photos app. Scrolled back through months of pictures. Eli's birthday party in July. 4th of July barbecue. Spring break trip to Table Rock Lake. In every photo she saw it now, the way Eli leaned away from Cole. The way he didn't quite smile when Cole touched him. The way his shoulders tensed. How had she not seen it? Or had she seen it and just explained it away? Boys being boys. Cole being strict. Everyone has bad days. Every excuse she'd made. Every time she'd told herself things weren't that bad. Every time she defended him to her sister or her mother or herself. She opened a new note in her phone and started typing. October 15th. Hospital visit. Bruising on neck. Nurse Brenda Knox said Cole was flagged in system. Previous incident. 3 years ago. She saved it and put the phone down. This was just the beginning. The next morning, Tamsin woke before the alarm. She'd barely slept, just drifted in and out of consciousness on the couch, too anxious to go upstairs to the bedroom. The house was still dark, the sky outside just starting to lighten to gray. She made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with her phone, doing what she should have done years ago. She Googled Cole's name. Nothing unusual came up. His Facebook page, professional and boring. A few mentions in local news articles about the construction company he worked for. A LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated since 2018. She tried Cole Brewer assault. Nothing. Cole Brewer child. Nothing relevant. Of course there wouldn't be. These things didn't always leave digital trails. She heard footsteps overhead. Cole was awake. She closed the browser quickly, felt ridiculous for doing it, then felt angry at herself for feeling ridiculous. Cole came downstairs in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair sticking up on one side. He went straight for the coffee without looking at her. "I'm going to my mother's," Tamsin said. "With Eli. For a few days." Cole stopped mid-pour. "Like hell you are." "I need space to think." "Think about what?" He turned to face her, and his expression was dangerous now. "Think about how to poison my own kid against me. Think about how to play victim." "I need space," Tamsin repeated, keeping her voice level. "That's not negotiable." "Nothing's wrong with this family except you," Cole said. "You and your paranoia, making everyone think I'm some kind of monster. Then you have nothing to worry about." She stood and walked past him to the stairs. Cole grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to stop her. "Tamsin." His voice changed, softened. "Don't do this. Don't ruin everything over nothing." She looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his face. "Let go of me. We can talk about this." "Let go." He released her, and she went upstairs to Eli's room. Her son was awake, sitting on his bed, staring at his hands. He looked up when she came in, and she saw the dark circles under his eyes, the exhaustion that came from fear. "Pack a bag," Tamsin said gently. "We're going to Grandma's." "For how long?" "As long as we need to." Eli nodded and started pulling clothes from his dresser. Tamsin went to her own room and did the same, moving quickly and quietly. Cole didn't follow her upstairs. She could hear him downstairs, pacing, muttering to himself. When they came down with their bags, Cole was standing in the living room, arms crossed. "This is temporary," he said. "You'll come back when you've calmed down." Tamsin didn't answer. She just opened the front door and guided Eli out to the car, started the engine, backed out of the driveway. Cole stood in the doorway, watching them leave, and even from a distance, Tamsin could see the anger in his posture, the barely restrained rage. She drove to her mother's house on the other side of town, hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, constantly checking the rearview mirror to make sure Cole wasn't following. Her mother, Patricia, met them at the door in her bathrobe, eyes going wide when she saw their bags. "What happened? Can we come in?" Tamsin asked. Patricia stepped aside and they entered. The house smelled like cinnamon and coffee, familiar and safe. Eli went straight to the guest room without being told, like he knew this wasn't a social visit. Patricia turned to Tamsin, waiting. "Cole hurt Eli," Tamsin said quietly. "Yesterday. I took him to the hospital." Her mother's expression shifted through several emotions. Shock, concern, then something that looked uncomfortably like doubt. "Hurt him how?" "Strangled him." "Strangled?" Patricia put her hand to her mouth. "Tamsin, that's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's what happened." "Did Cole say?" "Cole said he fell." "Cole lied." Patricia sat down heavily on the couch, and Tamsin saw something she'd never seen before, her mother trying to decide whether to believe her. "Mom," Tamsin said, her voice breaking slightly. "Please, I need you to believe me." "I do, honey. I do. It's just," Patricia shook her head. "This is hard to process. Cole's always been so good to that boy." Had he, though? Tamsin thought back through years of interactions. The harsh words disguised as discipline. The way Cole would mock Eli for crying, call him weak, say boys needed to toughen up. The time Eli came home with a bloody nose and Cole's only response was to tell him to hit back harder. She'd called it old-school parenting in her head. She'd been wrong. "I'm going to call an attorney," Tamsin said, "and I need you to support me, no matter what happens." Patricia looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded, slowly. Okay, baby. Whatever you need." But Tamsin heard the hesitation in her voice, saw the uncertainty in her eyes, and she realized this was just the first of many conversations she'd have to endure. People doubting her, questioning her, suggesting maybe she'd misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't as bad as she thought, maybe she was overreacting. She wasn't. For the first time in years, she was seeing things exactly as they were. Over the next 3 weeks, Tamsin learned what it meant to tell the truth in a town that preferred comfortable lies. Her sister, Rebecca, called 2 days after Tamsin left Cole. They hadn't spoken in months, not since the argument at Christmas where Tamsin had defended Cole's behavior, insisted he was just stressed about work, just going through a hard time. "Mom told me what happened," Rebecca said over the phone. Her voice was careful, walking a tightrope. "Are you sure about this?" Tamsin was sitting in her mother's kitchen, watching Eli play in the backyard. "Sure about what?" "About Cole. About leaving. About—" Rebecca trailed off. "Look, I know things have been tense, but do you really think he deliberately hurt Eli?" "Yes." Silence on the other end. "Becky," Tamsin said quietly, "I saw the marks. The hospital staff saw them. They took photos. This isn't me being dramatic." "I'm not saying you're dramatic. I'm just asking if you might have misunderstood the situation. How do you misunderstand finger-shaped bruises?" Another pause. Then Cole called me. "He's devastated. He said you won't let him see Eli, that you're turning everyone against him." Tamsin closed her eyes. Of course he'd called. Of course he was making himself the victim. What else did he say? That Eli fell. That it was an accident. That you're using this to try to take his son away. And you believe him. "I'm trying to stay neutral," Rebecca said. "I'm trying to see both sides." "There aren't two sides to child abuse." "Jesus, Tamsin. That's a huge accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a fact." Tamsin stood and walked to the window, watching Eli kick a soccer ball against the fence. "And you know what? I defended him to you for years. Every time you said he was too hard on Eli, too controlling, too angry, I made excuses. I told you that you didn't understand. But you were right. You saw it, and I didn't want to." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "I want to believe you. I do. But this is going to blow up your whole life. The divorce, the custody battle, what people will say. Are you ready for that?" "I don't care what people say." "You should. Cole has friends in this town. He has family. They're already talking. Let them talk." "Tamsin." "I have to go," Tamsin said. "Eli needs lunch." She hung up before Rebecca could respond, set the phone down on the counter, and stared at it, waiting for it to ring again. It didn't. The rumors started quickly. Small towns were efficient that way. Tamsin heard them secondhand, through her mother, through former friends who called with that particular tone of false concern. Cole was telling people she'd had a breakdown, that she was seeing things that weren't there, that she'd always been unstable. Didn't everyone remember how emotional she got, how anxious, how she'd needed medication after Eli was born? Postpartum depression became evidence of instability. Her request for space became abandonment. Her attempt to protect her child became parental alienation. On Sunday, Tamsin took Eli to the early service at Grace Community Church, the same church they'd attended as a family for 8 years. They sat in the back row. People stared. After the service, as they were leaving, Pastor Mike approached. He was a large man in his 50s with a warm smile and a handshake that always lasted a bit too long. Today his smile seemed strained. "Tamsin," he said, "good to see you. Could we talk for a minute?" She glanced at Eli. "Wait for me by the car, honey." When Eli was out of earshot, Pastor Mike's expression shifted to concern. "I heard about the situation with Cole. I'm praying for your family." "Thank you." "I also wanted to say," he paused, choosing words, "I know this is a difficult time, but I hope you'll consider counseling for the marriage. Sometimes these conflicts arise from misunderstandings, from stresses that build up." "It's not a misunderstanding," Tamsin interrupted. "No, of course not. I just mean that Cole's been a member of this congregation for over a decade. He's on the building committee. He's helped with youth group events. The man I know wouldn't," he stopped himself. "Wouldn't what?" "Hurt a child." "I'm just saying that there might be more to the situation than what it appears to be." Tamsin felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Did Cole tell you his version?" "He's been talking to several people in the congregation. He's hurting, Tamsin. He misses his family. He wants to make things right. He strangled our son." Pastor Mike's face twitched. "That's a very serious allegation. And if it's true, then of course there should be consequences. But we also believe in forgiveness, in reconciliation, in giving people the chance to change." "He doesn't want to change. He wants everyone to believe I'm lying." "I'm not saying you're lying, but I am saying that healing happens through grace, not through," he gestured vaguely, "through whatever this is. Separation, legal action, turning people against each other." Tamsin looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she'd never noticed before. Fear. He was afraid. Afraid of choosing sides. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of disrupting the comfortable equilibrium of his congregation. "Thank you for your prayers," Tamsin said flatly. "We need to go." She walked to the car where Eli waited, drove home in silence. That afternoon, she started getting text messages. People she'd known for years, women from her Bible study group, neighbors, distant acquaintances. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Cole seems really broken up about this. Have you thought about marriage counseling? Don't do anything you'll regret." She deleted them without responding. Cole started showing up places. Not at her mother's house. He knew better than that. Knew Patricia would call the police. But at the grocery store, at the gas station, at Eli's school during afternoon pickup. The first time Tamsin saw him at the school, her hands went numb on the steering wheel. He was leaning against his truck in the parking lot, arms crossed, watching the entrance. When he saw her, he smiled and waved like they were on good terms. She pulled into a spot as far from him as possible and called the school office. "This is Tamsin Brewer. My husband is not permitted to pick up my son. There should be a note in his file." The secretary's voice was apologetic. "Yes, we have that note. Mr. Brewer hasn't tried to enter the building. He's just in the parking lot, which is public property. Can't you ask him to leave?" "Legally, we can't prevent him from being in a public parking lot unless he's been served with a restraining order. I'm working on that." "I understand, Mrs. Brewer. We're keeping a close eye on the situation." When Eli came out, Tamsin got out of the car and met him at the door, putting herself between him and Cole's line of sight. They got into the car, quickly. Cole didn't approach, didn't call out, just watched. That night, Tamsin sat down at her mother's kitchen table with her laptop and started documenting everything. Dates, times, specific incidents. She went back through years of memories, writing down things she'd previously dismissed as minor. June 2022. Eli flinched when Cole raised his hand to adjust the rearview mirror. Lasted only a second, but it was noticeable. August 2022. Cole grabbed Eli by the shoulders hard enough to leave red marks. Called it, getting his attention. November 2022. Thanksgiving dinner. Cole criticized Eli for crying when he got stung by a wasp. called him weak in front of the whole family. Eli went silent for the rest of the night. March 2023. Eli's teacher sent an email expressing concern about behavior changes. Eli had become withdrawn, anxious about getting answers wrong in class. Cole dismissed it as being soft. September 2023. Found Eli hiding in his closet after school. He said he didn't want to come out because he'd gotten a B on a test. When I asked why that was scary, he wouldn't answer. The list grew longer. Each entry felt like a small betrayal, not of Cole, but of herself for not acting sooner, for making excuses, for choosing peace over protection. She also went through her phone, through old text messages with friends, with family. Found conversations where she'd defended Cole's parenting style, where she'd minimized his anger, where she'd explained away concerning behavior. He's just old-fashioned about discipline. He wants Eli to be tough. He had a rough childhood, so he doesn't always know how to be gentle. Every excuse now felt like a stone in her stomach. She started taking screenshots, saving emails, making copies of Eli's medical records, school reports, anything that might serve as documentation. She opened a separate bank account that Cole didn't know about and transferred half of their savings into it. She was building a case. The attorney she found, Michelle Howard, had offices above a coffee shop downtown. She was in her early 40s, professional without being cold, and had a reputation for taking on difficult family law cases. "Tell me everything," Michelle said, settling behind her desk with a legal pad. Tamsin talked for an hour, told her about the bathroom incident, the hospital visit, the patterns she'd finally started seeing. She showed Michelle the photos the hospital had taken of Eli's bruising, showed her the documentation she'd been compiling. Michelle listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally. When Tamsin finished, Michelle set down her pen. "This is a solid start," she said, "but I need to be honest with you about what you're facing. Cole will fight this. Men like him always do. And he's going to use every tool available. Paint you as vindictive, as mentally unstable, as a woman scorned who's using false allegations to win a custody battle. They're not false. I know that. You know that. But we have to prove it. And in family court, that's harder than you'd think." Michelle leaned forward. "The nurse at the hospital, Brenda Knox, she mentioned there was a previous incident with another child. Do you know anything about that?" "Just what she told me. Different last name. 3 years ago. We need to find that person. If there's a pattern of behavior, if there's another victim willing to testify, that strengthens your case considerably. How do I find them?" "Start with Cole's family, ex-girlfriends, his sister, anyone who might have brought a child into his life. Look for people who suddenly cut contact with him. Look for restraining orders, police reports, anything in public records." Tamsin thought about Cole's sister, Emma, who'd moved away, about his ex-girlfriend, the one he'd called crazy, about how many times people had tried to tell her things and she hadn't listened. "I'll find them," she said. Michelle nodded. "In the meantime, we'll file for an emergency custody order and a restraining order. The hospital photos are compelling evidence. We'll also request a child psychologist evaluation for Eli. It'll take time, but we need to establish a formal record of what's happened." "How long?" "Months, most likely. Maybe longer if it goes to trial." Tamsin's heart sank. "And during that time, you keep documenting. You keep Eli safe. You don't engage with Cole except through attorneys. And you prepare yourself for it to get worse before it gets better." It got worse. 2 weeks later, on a Thursday night, Tamsin was making dinner at her mother's house when she heard the doorbell ring. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her mother had gone to book club. Eli was upstairs doing homework. She looked through the peephole. Cole stood on the front porch. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She checked that the deadbolt was locked, then stood very still, trying to decide what to do. The bell rang again, then knocking. Loud, insistent. "Tamsin, I know you're in there. Open the door." His voice was calm. Too calm. Go away, Cole. You're not supposed to be here. I just want to talk. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. We have nothing to talk about. Leave, or I'm calling the police. For what? A laugh. For wanting to talk to my own wife. Cole, I'm serious. Leave. The knocking stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, you think you're smarter than everyone, don't you? You think they'll all believe you. Tamsin pulled her phone from her pocket, finger hovering over 911. I've been talking to people, Cole continued, his voice still eerily level. They don't believe you. They think you're having some kind of episode, making things up because you're angry at me, because our marriage has problems, because you want to take Eli away. That's not true. Isn't it? You've always been emotional, anxious. After Eli was born, you were on medication. Remember? Remember how you'd have those panic attacks over nothing? She hated how he twisted everything. Postpartum depression, which she'd gotten help for, which she'd worked through, now became evidence of instability. You need to leave, she said again, her voice shaking now. I'm not going anywhere until you listen to me. Then she heard it. Footsteps upstairs. Eli, probably coming to see what the noise was about. Stay upstairs. Tamsin called out, but it was too late. Eli appeared at the top of the stairs, his face pale. Is that Dad? Cole must have heard his voice because he started knocking again, harder this time. Eli, buddy, it's Dad. Come open the door. Go back to your room, Tamsin said to Eli, but her son was frozen on the stairs. Eli, open this door right now. Cole's voice rose. Don't let her keep you from me. Tamsin called 911. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. There's a man at my door who won't leave. My estranged husband. I have a protection order pending, and he's refusing to go. Is he inside the residence? No, but he's trying to. A loud bang cut her off. Cole had hit the door hard. The frame shook. Ma'am, I'm sending officers to your location now. Stay on the line with me. Another bang. Cole was kicking the door now, his control completely gone. If you step inside, I'll call the police. Tamsin shouted through the door. You already did. Cole yelled back. You think that scares me? You think I'm going to let you turn my own son against me? One more kick, and the door frame splintered slightly. Not enough to break through, but close. Then, sirens in the distance, getting louder. The kicking stopped. This isn't over, Tamsin, Cole said, his voice dropping back to that calm, controlled tone. This is never going to be over. She heard his footsteps retreating down the porch steps, heard his truck door slam, heard the engine start. By the time the police arrived, 3 minutes later, Cole was gone. 2 officers took her statement. One of them was older, maybe close to retirement, with tired eyes and a notebook he'd probably filled 1,000 times before. The other was younger, a woman with her hair in a tight bun. The older officer looked at the damaged door frame and made notes. Did he make any specific threats? He said it wasn't over, that it was never going to be over. That's vague, hard to prosecute. He kicked my door in. Damaged it, yes, but didn't actually enter. He closed his notebook. We'll file a report, and this will support your restraining order application. But without physical entry or a clear verbal threat, there's not much we can charge him with tonight. The female officer spoke up. Ma'am, has he done anything like this before? Not like this, but he's been showing up places where I am. The school, the grocery store. Has he approached you? Followed you? No, he just watches. The officers exchanged a glance. We'll increase patrols in this area, the woman said, and you should document everything. Every sighting, every encounter, every attempt at contact. It all helps build the pattern. After they left, Tamsin sat on the couch with Eli, her arm around his shoulders. He was shaking. Why does Dad hate us? He whispered. He doesn't hate you, baby. She stopped. She'd been about to make an excuse, about to soften it. He's angry that I'm not letting him control us anymore. And he's taking it out on both of us. What if he comes back? Then we call the police again. And again. As many times as it takes. What if they don't get here in time? Tamsin didn't have a good answer for that. So she just held him tighter and lied. They will. We're safe. I promise. But lying in bed that night, she couldn't sleep. She kept hearing Cole's voice through the door, kept hearing that threat. This is never going to be over. She believed him. The next morning, her mother came home from book club early, saw the damaged door frame, and insisted Tamsin take Eli somewhere else. Somewhere Cole didn't know about. My friend Diane has a cabin up at Clearwater Lake, Patricia said. It's just sitting empty this time of year. You could stay there for a while, just until things settle down. I can't run. It's not running. It's being smart. Her mother's voice was firm. Cole's escalating. You saw what happened last night. Next time could be worse. Tamsin wanted to argue, but she thought about Eli's face, about how terrified he'd been. For how long? As long as you need. Diane won't mind. So they packed again. More clothes, Eli's school books, the laptop with all her documentation. They left town in the early afternoon, took back roads that Cole wouldn't know to watch. The cabin sat in a cluster of trees 50 yards from the lake. It was small, just 2 bedrooms and a living area with a stone fireplace, but it was quiet, isolated, safe. They settled in. Tamsin enrolled Eli in online schooling temporarily, made sure her attorney knew where they were, kept documenting, kept building her case. But she also started searching. Emma, Cole's sister. She'd moved to Kansas City 3 years ago with her daughter. Tamsin found her on Facebook. Profile picture of her and a girl who must be 11 now, both smiling at a pumpkin patch. She sent a message. Emma, this is Tamsin. I need to talk to you about Cole. It's important. Then she searched for the ex-girlfriend. Took her longer to find her because Cole had always called her that crazy woman without using her name. But Tamsin eventually tracked her down through old tagged photos. Kaylin Moore. She lived in Springfield now. Another message. You don't know me, but we have something in common. Cole Brewer. I need to know what happened with you and your son. She sent both messages and waited. 3 days later, she got a response from Emma. I can't talk about this. Tamsin wrote back, he hurt Eli. I'm trying to protect him. Please. No response. But the next evening, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Tamsin. Yes. It's Emma. A pause. I don't have much time. My husband doesn't know I'm calling. Tamsin's heart rate picked up. What happened with your daughter? Cole babysat her one weekend when she was 8. When I picked her up, she was terrified of him. Wouldn't say why. Just said she didn't want to go back. Emma's voice was tight. I took her to a doctor. She had bruises on her arms. Defensive wounds, they called them. Like she'd tried to protect herself. Did you report it? I tried. But Cole said she'd fallen down the stairs. Said I was overreacting, being paranoid. Our parents sided with him. Said I was trying to ruin his reputation. Emma's voice broke slightly. I was a single mom. No money for a lawyer. And everyone believed him over me. So you moved. I couldn't stay in that town knowing he was walking around free, knowing people thought I was lying. It was easier to leave. Would you testify now? In my custody case? Long silence. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. Talk to my husband. Emma, please. He's still doing it. And if he gets away with it again. I know. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. I know. Let me think about it. She hung up. Tamsin sat with the phone in her hand, staring at the lake through the window. One potential witness. Not a yes, but not a no. 2 days later, Kaylin Moore responded to her message. I can meet you, but not at your place. Somewhere public. They arranged to meet at a diner in Springfield, a 2-hour drive from the cabin. Tamsin left Eli with her mother and drove there on a gray Saturday morning. Kaylin was already waiting in a back booth, a cup of coffee cooling in front of her. She was younger than Tamsin expected, maybe 35, with dark hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. Thank you for coming, Tamsin said, sliding into the booth across from her. Kaylin looked at her for a long moment. How bad was it? Bad enough that I left. Bad enough that I'm filing for full custody. With Eli, right? That's his name. Tamsin nodded. Kaylin's hands wrapped around her coffee cup. My son was 6 when it happened. Cole and I had been dating for 8 months. I thought he was good with kids. Patient. Then one night I came home early from work and found my son locked in the bathroom. Cole standing outside telling him he'd stay there until he learned to be a man. Jesus. It got worse. The next month, my son started having accidents. Bedwetting. Night terrors. When I asked Cole to back off, to be gentler, he said I was raising a weakling. Kaylin's voice hardened. Then I caught him shaking my son, literally shaking him, screaming in his face about respect. What did you do? I kicked him out, got a restraining order, but he told everyone I was crazy, that I was making it up because he'd broken up with me. She looked directly at Tamsin. He convinced a lot of people. My own friends started doubting me. Did you keep records? Everything. Photos, medical reports, therapy notes from my son's counselor. Kaylin paused. I was told it wouldn't matter, that without witnesses, without injuries bad enough to prosecute, it was my word against his. It wasn't, Tamsin said quietly. There were witnesses. The hospital staff saw warning signs. They just didn't act. Kaylin's eyes filled with tears. I moved away because I couldn't stand being in the same town anymore. Couldn't stand seeing his truck around, knowing he got away with it. She wiped her eyes roughly, but I kept everything, just in case. Would you testify in my custody case? Kaylin nodded slowly. Yeah, I will. Because if I'd had someone backing me up 3 years ago, maybe none of this would have happened to your son. They talked for another hour. Compared stories, compared patterns. The way Cole isolated his targets. The way he manufactured doubt. The way he used people's desire to believe him against his victims. When Tamsin drove back to the cabin that afternoon, she had copies of Kaylin's documentation in her car. Medical records for Kaylin's son. Photos. Therapy notes. Police reports. 2 witnesses now. A pattern. She called Michelle Howard from the car. We have corroboration, Tamsin said. Another mother with the same story. Same pattern of abuse. That changes everything, Michelle said. Forward me everything you have. I'll prepare an amended filing. For the first time in weeks, Tamsin felt something like hope. Cole had depended on silence, on people doubting, on his victims disappearing before they could tell their stories. But Tamsin wasn't going to disappear, and she wasn't going to be silent. The custody hearing was scheduled for the 3rd week of January, 6 months after Tamsin had first left. 6 months of living in limbo, of looking over her shoulder, of documenting every detail of her life to prove she was a fit parent. The courthouse in Redwood County was an old brick building with marble floors that echoed when you walked. Tamsin arrived early with Michelle Howard, both of them dressed in conservative business attire. Michelle had been explicit about appearances. Nothing too casual, nothing too expensive, nothing that would give Cole's attorney ammunition. They sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, waiting. Tamsin's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Remember what we practiced, Michelle said quietly. Answer the questions directly. Don't volunteer extra information. Don't let them bait you into an emotional response. And whatever you do, don't look at Cole. What if I can't? You can. Michelle's voice was firm. You've been preparing for this for months. You know your truth. Trust it. At exactly 9 o'clock, the bailiff called them in. The courtroom was smaller than Tamsin expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, an American flag in the corner. Judge Patricia Henning sat at the bench, a woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Cole sat at the defendant's table with his attorney, a man named Robert Carlson, who looked like he did a lot of golf and very little sleeping. Cole wore a suit Tamsin had never seen before, probably bought specifically for today. He looked smaller somehow without his usual swagger. Their eyes met for just a second before Tamsin looked away. The judge reviewed the case file, flipping through pages. This is a petition for sole custody with supervised visitation, she said. The allegations are serious. Mr. Brewer, you understand that this court takes accusations of child abuse very seriously. Yes, Your Honor, Cole said. His voice was steady, respectful. Ms. Brewer, you understand that making false allegations in a custody case is also a serious matter. Yes, Your Honor, but these allegations are not false. Judge Henning nodded. Then let's proceed. Ms. Howard, call your first witness. The petitioner calls Tamsin Brewer. Tamsin walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, sat down. The room felt too bright, too exposed. Michelle started with basic questions. How long had they been married? When did she first notice concerning behavior? What happened the night of October 15th? Tamsin answered each question carefully, methodically. Described finding Eli on the bathroom floor. Described the marks on his throat. Described how Cole had lied about what happened. And what did the medical professionals tell you at the hospital? Michelle asked. The nurse, Brenda Knox, told me that Cole had been flagged in their system, that there had been a previous incident involving another child. Cole's attorney stood. Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay. Sustained, Judge Henning said. The witness may not testify about what others told her regarding previous allegations unless those individuals are present to testify. We'll be calling Nurse Knox as a witness, Michelle said smoothly, as well as other individuals with relevant information. The questioning continued. Michelle walked Tamsin through the patterns she documented, the increasingly controlling behavior, the verbal abuse, the intimidation tactics. Then it was Carlson's turn to cross-examine. He stood slowly buttoning his jacket. Mrs. Brewer, you mentioned that your husband has been controlling. Can you give specific examples? He monitored my phone, questioned where I went, got angry if I spent time with friends without him. Did he ever prevent you from leaving the house? Not physically, but he'd make it difficult, make me feel guilty. So he never locked you in? Never physically restrained you? No, but... Just yes or no, please. You also mentioned verbal abuse. What specific words did he use that you consider abusive? Tamsin tried to remember exact quotes, but the words blurred together. He called Eli weak, told him real men don't cry. Is it your position that a father shouldn't encourage his son to be strong? There's a difference between encouragement and cruelty. A subjective difference, though. One person's tough love is another person's abuse. Carlson paused. Mrs. Brewer, you sought treatment for postpartum depression after your son was born, correct? Tamsin's stomach tightened. Yes. And you were prescribed medication? Yes. Are you still on that medication? No. I finished treatment 7 years ago. But you've struggled with anxiety, with panic attacks. Your own sister testified in a deposition that you've always been, quote, emotionally fragile. Michelle stood. Objection. Relevance. Your Honor, it goes to the witness's credibility and her ability to accurately perceive events. I'll allow it, Judge Henning said. But tread carefully, Mr. Carlson. Carlson turned back to Tamsin. Is it possible that in your anxious state, You misinterpreted what you saw that night, that an accidental injury became, in your mind, evidence of intentional abuse. No, I know what I saw, but you've admitted to sometimes struggling with perception when under stress. That's not what I said. You've admitted to having panic attacks, to anxiety severe enough to require medication. Is it so unreasonable to suggest that your judgment might be impaired? Tamsin forced herself to breathe steadily. My mental health history does not change the fact that my son had finger-shaped bruises on his throat. It doesn't change what the doctors documented. It doesn't change the pattern of behavior that I and others have witnessed. Carlson smiled slightly. We'll see what others have witnessed. The questioning continued for another 30 minutes. By the time Tamsin was dismissed, she felt wrung out, hollowed. But then Michelle called Brenda Knox. The nurse took the stand in her scrubs, having come directly from her shift. She looked tired but determined. "Nurse Knox," Michelle said, "were you on duty the night Eli Brewer was brought to the emergency room?" "I was." "Can you describe his condition when you first saw him?" The boy was in respiratory distress, elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, signs of panic. He had visible bruising on his neck, consistent with manual strangulation. "Did you speak with Cole Brewer that night?" "Briefly, when he arrived at the hospital." "And what was your reaction to seeing him?" Brenda looked directly at Cole. "I recognized him. 3 years earlier, he'd brought in another child, his niece, I believe, with similar injuries. Bruising on the arms, defensive wounds. At the time, there were concerns about the circumstances." "What kind of concerns?" "The kind that prompted us to file a report with Child Protective Services." Cole's face had gone red. He leaned over to whisper something to his attorney. "And what happened with that report?" Michelle asked. "I don't know. CPS investigated, but I never heard the outcome. The family moved shortly after." "But you remembered Mr. Brewer?" "I did. We make notes in the system when there are concerning patterns. Mr. Brewer was flagged as someone who should not be left unsupervised with pediatric patients." "Thank you, Nurse Knox." Carlson's cross-examination was brief, focused on trying to discredit the previous incident as unproven allegations. But the damage was done. Judge Henning's expression had shifted from neutral to concerned. Next, Michelle called Kaylin Moore. Kaylin walked to the stand with her head high, and Tamsin felt a surge of gratitude. This woman owed her nothing, had every reason to stay hidden, but she'd come anyway. "Ms. Moore," Michelle said, "can you describe your relationship with Cole Brewer?" "We dated for 8 months, about 3.5 years ago. I have a son who was 6 at the time." "And what was Mr. Brewer's relationship with your son like initially?" "At first it seemed fine. He was patient, played with him. I thought he'd be a good influence." "When did that change?" Kaylin's voice stayed steady, but her hands gripped the edge of the witness stand. "After about 4 months, he started criticizing my son constantly, telling him he was too soft, too scared, too weak. He'd mock him for being afraid of the dark or for crying when he got hurt." "Did you witness any physical abuse?" "Yes, multiple times. Once, I came home and found my son locked in the bathroom. Cole had put him there as punishment for not eating his dinner fast enough." Kaylin paused. "Another time, I walked in on Cole shaking my son, screaming in his face about respect." "What did you do?" "I ended the relationship immediately, got a restraining order, and I took my son to a therapist because he'd started having panic attacks, bedwetting, night terrors." "Do you have documentation of these incidents?" "Yes. Medical records, therapy notes, photos of bruises, copies of the police reports." Michelle entered the documentation into evidence. Judge Henning reviewed each page carefully, her expression growing darker. Carlson's cross-examination tried to paint Kaylin as a vindictive ex-girlfriend, but she didn't waver. answered every question calmly, referred back to the documentation, never let him shake her. When she was dismissed, she walked past Cole without looking at him. Emma testified next via video conference from Kansas City, her face pale on the courtroom screen. She told her story, the babysitting incident, the bruises on her daughter, the way her family had sided with Cole. Her voice shook, but she got through it. By the time the testimonies were finished, it was late afternoon. Judge Henning called a recess until the following morning. That night, Tamsin couldn't sleep. She lay in her hotel room. Michelle had insisted she not go back to the cabin, to stay somewhere public, and stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then, thinking it might be Emma or Kaylin, "Hello? You think you've won." Cole's voice. Tamsin sat up, her heart pounding. "How did you get this number? You're not as smart as you think you are. You're not as protected as you think you are." "I'm recording this call." "Go ahead. Record it. No one's going to care. You know why? Because men like me, we don't lose. The system protects us. Your little parade of witnesses, your doctors, your nurses, it doesn't matter. I'm his father. That means something." "Not anymore, it doesn't." Cole laughed. "We'll see. But even if you win tomorrow, and you won't, but even if you do, I'll still be part of his life. I'll still be in your head. Every time you look at Eli, you'll remember that I made him, that he's half me, and there's nothing you can do about that. He's nothing like you. Yet, give it time." The call ended. Tamsin sat in the dark, shaking. Then she called Michelle and played her the recording. "File this with the court tomorrow," Michelle said. "This is witness intimidation. It's a violation of the restraining order. It's more evidence of his character. He's right, though, isn't he? Even if I win custody, he'll still be there. Still be part of this." "No," Michelle said firmly. "If we win tomorrow, when we win, he'll have supervised visitation at best. He'll be a footnote in Eli's life, not the main story. And eventually, when Eli's old enough, he can choose to have no contact at all. That's years away. But it's possible, and that's what we're fighting for. Not perfection, just possibility." The next morning, Cole took the stand. He'd clearly been coached, spoke respectfully to the judge, expressed remorse for any misunderstandings that had occurred, claimed he loved his son more than anything. "Mr. Brewer," Michelle said during her cross-examination, "you told the police that Eli fell. That's how he got the bruises on his neck. Is that correct?" "Yes. He tripped in the hallway." And yet, the medical examiner testified that the bruising pattern is consistent with manual strangulation, not a fall. The doctor was wrong. Multiple doctors, multiple medical professionals, all wrong. Or maybe they were biased because my wife had already told them her version. Michelle pulled up a photo on the courtroom screen. Eli's throat, the distinctive finger marks. "Can you explain how a fall produces 4 parallel bruises in the exact spacing of adult fingers?" "I don't know. I'm not a doctor." "No, but you are a father who put his hands on his child's throat." "Objection!" Carlson stood, argumentative. Sustained. Michelle changed tactics. "Mr. Brewer, are you familiar with Kaylin Moore?" "I dated her briefly. It didn't work out." "Because you abused her son?" "Because she was unstable and made up stories when I ended things." "And your sister Emma? Is she also unstable?" "My sister has always been dramatic, overprotective. So everyone who accuses you of abusing children is either unstable, dramatic, or lying." "I'm saying people sometimes misinterpret things." "Mr. Brewer, did you call your wife last night?" Cole hesitated. "No, you didn't call from a blocked number and threaten her." "Absolutely not." Michelle played the recording. Cole's voice filled the courtroom. "You're not as smart as you think you are. Men like me, we don't lose." The blood drained from Cole's face. Is that your voice, Mr. Brewer? Aye, that's taken out of context. What context makes threatening your wife during a custody hearing acceptable? Cole had no answer. Judge Henning removed her glasses and looked at Cole for a long moment. Mr. Brewer, I've been on this bench for 19 years. I've seen a lot of custody cases. I've seen parents use children as weapons. I've seen false allegations. I've seen coaching. I've seen manipulation. She paused. This is not one of those cases. Cole started to speak, but the judge held up her hand. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Multiple witnesses with consistent stories, medical documentation, a pattern of behavior spanning years, and now, recorded evidence of you attempting to intimidate a witness. She put her glasses back on. I'm ruling in favor of the petitioner. Full custody to Tamsin Brewer. You are granted supervised visitation only 1 hour per week at a state-approved facility, contingent on completion of anger management and parenting classes. Your Honor, Cole's attorney started. Furthermore, Judge Henning continued, I'm extending the restraining order indefinitely. Mr. Brewer, you are not to contact your ex-wife except through attorneys. You are not to go near her residence, her workplace, or your son's school. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. She brought down her gavel. It was over. Tamsin felt Michelle's hand squeeze hers, felt the weight of 6 months lift slightly. Not completely, it would never completely lift, but enough to breathe. Cole sat frozen at his table, staring at nothing. Outside the courtroom, Emma was waiting. She'd flown in that morning to be there for the verdict. She hugged Tamsin tightly. Thank you, Tamsin whispered. Thank you for being brave. You were braver, Emma said. You stayed and fought. Kaylin was there too, standing near the elevator. Is it over? For now, Tamsin said. He'll probably appeal. Let him. He'll lose again. Kaylin smiled slightly. And every time he loses, it gets easier to live with what happened. Easier to believe we did the right thing. 3 weeks later, there was a sentencing hearing for the charges of child abuse, witness intimidation, and violation of restraining order. The criminal case had proceeded separately from the custody case, but the evidence overlapped. The prosecutor was efficient, presented the medical records, the testimony transcripts, the recorded phone call. Didn't dramatize. Didn't need to. Cole's attorney tried to argue for probation, community service, claimed Cole had learned his lesson, was seeking help, was remorseful. But Judge Michael Torres wasn't buying it. Mr. Brewer, the judge said, looking directly at Cole, you created an environment of fear for multiple children across several years. You relied on silence, on doubt, on people's unwillingness to believe the worst of you. You manipulated, intimidated, and when that didn't work, you threatened. Cole stared at the floor. The pre-sentencing report indicates you show no genuine remorse. Your attitude throughout these proceedings has been one of entitlement and anger, not reflection. Judge Torres picked up a document. I'm sentencing you to 5 years in state prison on the child abuse charges, consecutive to 2 years for witness intimidation. You will serve a minimum of 4 years before being eligible for parole. 7 years. Cole's face went white. His attorney started to protest, but the judge was already moving on to the terms of parole, the mandatory counseling, the permanent record that would follow Cole for the rest of his life. Tamsin watched as the bailiff led Cole away in handcuffs. He looked back once, and his eyes found hers. She saw rage there, hatred, the promise of future harm if he ever got the chance. She looked away first, not because she was afraid, but because he didn't deserve her attention anymore. 18 months later, Tamsin stood in the kitchen of a small duplex on the east side of town, watching Eli through the window. He was in the backyard, kicking a soccer ball against a wooden fence, laughing when it bounced back at unexpected angles. The duplex wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a single bathroom, a kitchen that barely fit a table, but it was theirs. Clean, safe, full of light. Tamsin had gotten her job back at the county clerk's office, once things settled down. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. And more importantly, it was predictable. No surprises. No walking on eggshells. Eli was doing better. Still saw a therapist once a week. Still had nightmares sometimes, but he was sleeping through most nights now. He'd made friends at his new school. Joined the soccer team. Started smiling again in a way that reached his eyes. He was 11 now, growing taller every month, starting to look less like a child and more like the person he was becoming. The doorbell rang. Tamsin checked the peephole, a habit she'd never break, and saw her mother standing on the porch with grocery bags. "I brought dinner," Patricia announced, pushing past her into the kitchen. "You look tired." "I'm fine, Mom." "You're always fine." Patricia started unpacking containers, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. Comfort food. "Have you heard from Emma lately?" "Last week. She said her daughter's doing well. Starting therapy finally." "That's good. And Kaylin?" "She's thinking about starting a support group for other mothers who've been through similar situations." Patricia nodded, arranging plates. "You should join it." "Maybe." "Tamsin, you don't have to do everything alone anymore." "I know. But it was hard to believe sometimes. Hard to let go of the hypervigilance that had kept them safe for so long. Hard to trust that the danger was really over. Cole was in prison. Would be for at least another 2.5 years. Eli's supervised visits, which happened once a month at the state facility, were going poorly. Cole couldn't hide his anger even for an hour. Couldn't pretend to be the father Eli needed. The last 3 visits, Eli had asked to leave early. The therapist said eventually when Eli was old enough, he could choose to stop the visits altogether. That day was coming. That evening, after dinner, after Patricia left, Tamsin sat with Eli on the couch. They were watching some animated movie he'd picked out, something with talking animals and improbable adventures. "Mom." Eli said during a quiet scene, "Yeah. Do you ever wish things were different? Like with Dad?" Tamsin considered the question carefully. "Do you?" "Sometimes. I wish he'd been different. Nice. But he wasn't, and I'm glad you got us out." "Me too, honey." "Do you think he'll change? In prison?" "I don't know. Maybe. But even if he does, that doesn't mean we have to let him back into our lives." Eli was quiet for a moment. "Is that bad? That I don't want him back?" "No. It's self-protection, and you have every right to that. But he's my dad." "Being a father is about more than biology," Tamsin said gently. "It's about showing up, being kind, making your child feel safe. Cole didn't do those things." "Did you love him? Before?" "I thought I did. But I think what I loved was the person I hoped he could be, not the person he actually was." She pulled Eli closer. "Love isn't supposed to hurt. It's not supposed to make you scared. Real love is what I feel for you, wanting you to be happy and safe and yourself." Eli nodded slowly. "I'm glad we left." "Me too." They watched the rest of the movie in comfortable silence. When it ended, Eli went upstairs to bed without being told. Another small sign of normalcy returning. Tamsin cleaned up the living room, turned off the lights, stood for a moment in the darkness. The house was quiet, but it was a different quiet than before. Not the tense, waiting silence of Cole's house. Just peace. Her phone buzzed. Text from Michelle. Appeals court denied Cole's motion. Verdict stands. Tamsin felt something release in her chest. She hadn't realized she was still holding tension around the possibility of the case being overturned. It was really over. She texted back, "Thank you for everything. Michelle, you did the hard part. I just helped with paperwork." But they both knew it was more than that. Michelle had believed her when belief was rare, had built the case methodically when others said it couldn't be done, had stood beside her in that courtroom and refused to let Cole's attorney tear her apart. Tamsin went upstairs, checked on Eli one more time. He was asleep, curled on his side, face peaceful. No nightmares tonight. She went to her own room, got ready for bed, and lay down. Tomorrow she'd go to work. Come home. Make dinner. Help with homework. Live the ordinary life she'd fought so hard to claim. Cole would rot in prison. Not because she'd wished it on him, not because she'd sought revenge, but because the consequences of his choices had finally caught up with him. She didn't forgive him. She never would. Forgiveness felt like something she was supposed to want, something people kept suggesting would help her heal. But she didn't need to forgive him to move forward. She just needed him gone. And he was. Some endings didn't need to be neat or forgiving. Sometimes the ending was just survival, protection, the absence of harm. And that was enough. 5 years later, Eli was 16, driving himself to school now, working part-time at the movie theater. He was taller than Tamsin, his voice deep, his interests shifting toward college applications and friends and the future. He hadn't seen Cole in 4 years, had stopped the supervised visits when he turned 14, as was his right. Cole had been released from prison a year ago, but hadn't attempted contact. The restraining order was still in effect. Maybe he'd learned something after all, or maybe he'd just moved on to easier targets. Tamsin didn't care which. He wasn't her problem anymore. She was sitting on the back porch, coffee in hand, watching the sun come up over the neighborhood. The duplex had become home in a way the house with Cole never had. They'd painted the walls, hung pictures, built a life that was theirs alone. Her phone rang. Emma. Hey, Tamsin answered. Everything okay? Everything's great. Listen, I wanted to let you know, my daughter got accepted to college. Full scholarship. Emma, that's amazing. She wants to be a counselor, work with kids who've been through trauma. Emma's voice was thick with emotion. She said it's because of everything that happened, because she saw how much it helped her to talk to someone. She's going to be incredible. Yeah. A pause. I'm calling because I wanted to thank you. If you hadn't fought back, if you hadn't found me and Kaylin and made us part of your case, I don't think I ever would have dealt with what happened. I would have just kept running. You dealt with it by protecting your daughter. That's what mattered. And you protected Eli. And in doing that, you protected all of us. Showed us it was possible to win. After they hung up, Tamsin sat for a while longer, thinking about that. About how one person's courage could ripple outward. About how silence protected abusers and truth protected children. Eli came downstairs, grabbed his keys. I'm heading out. Work at 4. Drive safe. Always do. He paused at the door. Hey, Mom. Yeah. Thanks. For everything. I know I don't say it enough. You don't have to. I do, though. You could have given up, or believed him, or decided it was too hard, but you didn't. He smiled, that open, genuine smile that he'd gotten back. So thanks. He left before she could respond, the door closing gently behind him. Tamsin sat on the porch until her coffee went cold, feeling something she hadn't felt in years, contentment. Not happiness exactly. Happiness felt too bright, too fragile for what they'd been through. But contentment, the solid, steady knowledge that they were safe, that they were free, that the worst was behind them. She thought about Cole sometimes, wondered if he ever thought about what he'd lost, if he understood that his need for control had cost him everything, his son, his freedom, his future. Probably not. Men like Cole rarely achieved that kind of self-awareness. But it didn't matter anymore. He was a chapter that had ended, a cautionary tale, a lesson learned the hardest way. The sun climbed higher. Birds sang in the trees. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. Tamsin finished her cold coffee, stood up, and went inside to start her day. She had survived. Eli had survived. and that was the only ending that mattered.